on, moving on to another theoretical paradigm. If you were tired of critical theory, good news. We're moving on to social exchange theory. Maybe this theoretical framework is more to your liking. We'll find out. So social exchange theory, that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Today, for the most part, the lecture will be devoted to the ideas of George Homans. Maybe there's a little time for us at the end of class to get into the work of Peter Blau. If not, that's okay, because we have Thursday, and we can discuss the work of Peter Blau on Thursday. Can you hear me okay in the back? Is this coming through? Okay, cool. All right, I came across a book many years ago when I was a graduate student, and I was taking an interest in social exchange theory. And according to this one researcher and author, he said, well, there's really two traditions. There's two traditions of exchange theory. One tradition we can call individualistic, which focuses more on the individual as the unit of analysis. So that's more in line with the work of George Homans, who's interested in individuals and the decision-making that individuals make when interacting with others and developing relationships with others, right? So there's that strain of social exchange theory, which is more centered on the individual psychology, individual actions, decision-making, the interactions that individuals have, the relationships that individuals develop, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's another tradition of social exchange theory, which is appropriately dubbed collectivistic. And that would be more in line with the work of Peter Blau, who was certainly interested in how do we take these principles of social exchange theory and apply them to better understand how collectivities work, how do institutions function. Homans, of course, would say all the institution is a collection of individuals. So moving from the micro to the macro doesn't lead to any real fundamental changes in, say, the validity of social exchange theory, because it's still individuals, granted larger groups of individuals, but individuals who are parts of institutions that still make decisions as rational actors. And those rational actors are informed by the same rationale, which is, I want to make a decision that's going to maximize my rewards and minimize my costs, right? So Homans would defend not only do individuals do this, but institutions do this. Blau, as we'll talk about on Thursday, seems to think that things change a little bit as we move from the micro to the macro, and we're dealing with the dynamics of institutions or social groups, organizations, that sort of thing. But anyhow, just so you know, there are these two traditions, individualistic and collectivistic. We'll start with the individualistic approach, and then we'll move to the collectivistic approach. But regardless of whether a person has more of a focus on the individual or the focus, say, on institutions, the idea is that social behavior, what both traditions have in common, is that social behavior is guided by rational calculation of an exchange of rewards and costs. Social behavior is guided by rational calculations, that you have rational individuals that, and that's also why I like social exchange theory and rational choice theory, is because they give us a very clear definition of what rational means. And what rational is that which leads to greater benefits than costs. So we could say any action, this is, philosophers have, for millennia, have debated what is rational action. What is rational to you might be irrational to me, et cetera, et cetera. Well, for the social exchange theorists, for the rational choice theorists, Rational action is always action that leads to a surplus of rewards minus costs. All right? So I'll come back to that idea later. But social behavior, it's guided by rational calculation of an exchange of rewards and costs. Social exchange theory, again, just to set this up in general terms before we get into the specific ideas of Hammond's, social exchange theory views human behavior and the relationships existing between people as the outcome of rational actors who are making choices, engaged in decision making, to maximize rewards and to minimize costs. Now, as I will explain, and it may sound a little bit redundant, but it is certainly a point worth repeating because it appears based on reading Hammond's work that no matter how many times he reiterated this message, people failed to understand it. Whatever people believe to be rewarding or costly, right? So Hammond's, as we'll talk about, he admits, he goes, I can't tell you what to value. What you might find rewarding is something that I find costly. But he's saying, I can understand what you're going to do by understanding what is relatively beneficial, rewarding for you, and what is relatively costly for you as the individual. So he would say that this system is general enough to capture, right, a basic formula by which people make decisions, maximizing rewards, minimizing costs, but it's also provides enough relativity, right? It really comes down to the individuals, the groups themselves, as to determine, well, what is rewarding or what is costly? What may be rewarding for you may not be rewarding for me. It may be costly. What may be rewarding for me may be costly to you. This system can account for those differences that people have, say, in terms of the values that they hold and the objectives to which they're oriented. The major strength of social exchange theory is in making interest-oriented action an explanatory principle. Meaning we're not ignoring self-interest. We're not pretending. Sociologists, I think, need to come to terms with the problem of self-interest. Many economists would say it's not a problem whatsoever. Right? That everyone is self-interested. Now that isn't to say that everybody is selfish, because there are certain costs that are associated with selfishness. If you act too selfish, other people define you as a selfish person, and they ostracize you, right? Or they exclude you. So the rational actor would say, well, I'm going to follow my interest, but I'm not going to follow my interest so far that makes me become a selfish person, because if I'm selfish, then I'll incur the cost because other people will be upset with me. Self-interested action is simply that you're doing things and making decisions in order to maximize your rewards or minimize your costs. So an example would be, why are you here today? Why are you a student at UCLA? Well, the social exchange theorists would say you're a student at UCLA and you're engaged in the type of exchanges you're engaged in as a student and the interactions that you're having with others in order to earn a college degree. Now, what's the point of earning a college degree? The basic idea is that with a college degree or a degree out of UCLA, that will enhance your vocational and occupational opportunities. So you're here, in other words, not because you're selfish. You're here because you're simply following your self-interest. And your self-interest to increase your education, which this is something of a sociological truism, will lead to, as we have plenty of statistics and figures to prove this, that any increase in formal education leads to an increase in income. So it's a mechanism, tried and true mechanism, of increasing your income, your annual income, right? And also occupational opportunities that are available to you. And also increasing your occupational prestige. So you're simply following your interests. You're following, say, your educational interests, which is also your economic interests, in order to maximize rewards. Again, economists have no problem, and economists win Nobel Prizes all the time. Based on it, in fact, I just saw, and I bought this book about 12 years ago, I believe it's called Why Do Nations Fail, or Why Nations Fail, whatever it is. It just won a Nobel Prize. Economists, two economists wrote the book, but 3 were awarded the Nobel Prize for it. It's really, if you begin to read it, you will see that many of the precepts, many of the tenets upon which their analysis are based, come down to interest, self-interest, and incentives. Economists like to talk about incentives. How do you get somebody to adopt a particular line of behavior? Well, you incentivize it for them. You give them incentives to choose that form of behavior, right? So it's about rewarding, and we'll get to this later, but for the social exchange theorist, rewarding people, having access to rewards, is an important instrument of power, because you can then shape people's behavior by giving them incentives to do certain things as opposed to other things. Right? So interest-oriented action becomes an explanatory principle. Why do people do what they do? They do what they do because out of self-interest in seeking to maximize rewards and to minimize costs, whatever those rewards and costs might be, as Hamann seems at pain to emphasize. It's like he says it over. I've read so many works of his, and he's like, once again, I'm going to state this again. I'm not telling people that I can predict what they will value or what they will determine to be rewarding or costly. To a large degree, to a large measure, those things are subjective. But once I know what a person values, once I know what a person deems to be costly, then I can better understand what decisions they will make, because they will seek to maximize rewards and minimize costs. And that becomes our working definition of rationality. That's what rationality is. Something that we would say is irrational when it leads to greater costs than rewards. We'd say, okay, again, I've used the example of gambling over and over and over again. When is it rational to gamble? We could probably form a consensus that it's rational to gamble when, after gambling, you walk away with profit as opposed to debt. That you make money out of gambling as opposed to lose it. Or maybe if you sort of take a longitudinal approach and you say, well, there were some losses here, but there were some. In the end, what are we talking about? What are the net gains? What are the net costs? If we have net gains over net costs, then we can say it's rational to gamble. Because the person is they're achieving the objective they're trying to achieve, which is to make more money than lose it. And then when is a person, say, being there, we have a gambling problem, and the problem has led to dysfunctional behavior and led to, say, costly behavior. Well, when the person's lost their house and everything that they own, the costs are greater than the rewards. And then we can say, well, that's a gambling addiction, and this person's lost everything that they own, and they now live in debt. We would say it's costly. Therefore, it's dysfunctional. Therefore, it's problematic behavior. Right? So social behavior as exchange, we're asked to read this excerpt that was in your textbook by George Hammond's. Hammond's theories were informed by ideas or principles that were developed, one, in behavioral psychology, and two, within neoclassical economics. Behavioral psychology and neoclassical economics. So Hammond's major breakthrough, and you maybe could think of Habermas in the way that Habermas was synthesizing the ideas of Parsons and Schutz and other Frankfurt School theorists, etc. George Hammond's is synthesizing findings from other fields, but then showing us as sociologists how these findings are important for explaining and understanding human behavior. So he synthesized findings or principles developed in behavioral psychology and neoclassical economics to uncover some very general behavioral propositions. And we'll discuss 5. Since 5 were discussed in the textbook, we'll discuss these 5 general propositions that can enable us, again, the strength of theory, as I said during week 0, if it's a really good theory, then it has some predictive power. It gives us some insight. We can use it to forecast, right, how people would behave under certain conditions. So let's start with the first principle, the main principle that's incorporated from behavioral psychology. What is the main principle incorporated from behavioral psychology? It's that, as we were saying, humans are reward-seeking and cost-avoiding. Reward-seeking and cost-avoiding. Now, Hammond's, again, as the synthesizer, drew much of his understanding, or evidence, shall we say, for this tendency that humans are reward-seeking, cost-avoiding, based on the research, the laboratory research of B.F. Skinner. So B.F. Skinner is most notable for his study of operant conditioning. What is operant conditioning? Operant conditioning is a process of learning, and that certainly works with us as sociologists, because two ends of the spectrum for explaining human behavior. On the one end, we have genetic inheritance as a way to explain behavior, and on the other hand, we have cultural acquisition. And cultural acquisition is simply a fancy way of saying learning. We acquire through life experience, right, certain cultural or attitudinal dispositions, right? And consequently, what follows from that, of course, are different forms of behavior. So, in short, human behavior, much like that of a pigeon or a house cat, is conditioned. It's conditioned by others. Right? Social psychology, we talk about this in great detail, and really by the end of the course, you realize that your entire life is one of conditioning, in which we were talking about it last week in the context of, say, popular culture, or the ruling class that implants needs. Then you spend your life trying to satisfy or satiate these sorts of things. But even within, and if we're not looking at it so cynically in that respect, if you simply look at the family unit and you look at the dynamics between children and parents, parenting is a process of conditioning. Parenting is a process of socialization in which you use rewards and you use punishments or sanctions in order to shape the behavioral responses of your children. And you say, if you do your homework, I will give you ice cream. What is the incentive? The children, what do they love more than anything else? It's ice cream. So as much as the child may find doing the homework to be costly, after the cost, the expenditure of time and effort of doing homework, they will be rewarded by their parents with ice cream. Right? So I guess the child will have to do some sort of mental calculation, right? And decide, well, this is tough math homework, right? Is ice cream going to be worth the expenditure of effort in doing this math assignment, right? Maybe initially, that when the parent says, you do your homework, you do your math homework, and then I'll give you ice cream, and maybe the child says, that's still not great enough of a reward. As much as I like ice cream, it's still not great enough of a reward. And then if the parent says, okay, and you can also double the time playing video games, well, then they say, okay, deal. We've got a deal. I'll do the math homework, and I'll get the ice cream, and I'll get an extra hour or whatever playing video games. The rewards are far greater than the costs. And so you're able to incentivize the action then of that child. Basic operant conditioning. You can apply it to virtually any living thing. Operant conditioning is a process of learning, so it fits within the paradigm of socialization, by which the repetition or avoidance of any behavior is due to its associated rewards and punishments. So the more a behavior, and we'll talk about these behavioral propositions later, but the more a reward, the more a behavior is followed by a reward, the more likely the individual is to engage in that behavior. It might be that that kid ends up realizing like the best way to get ice cream is by doing math homework. And so then you can even have the child say, I want to do my math homework. Can I get ice cream out of it? And the parent says, sure. Same though as it relates to avoidance of any behavior, meaning the behaviors, this is one that comes to mind whenever I teach this, right? I had an older sister, or my sister and I, of course, as sibling rivalries and competition, all siblings can relate to it. We tease each other, goof around. Sometimes we tease each other too much, and the parent would say, okay, I'm giving you a warning, quit chasing your sister around. And then I wouldn't quit chasing my sister around because I'm stubborn. And then I get another warning, and then finally Dad says, okay, I'm getting out the belt. And out comes the belt, and then a belt on the ass. That doesn't feel good. But you learn very quickly. Okay, when I get that second warning, that's when I stop, right? And if you stop, so that's avoidance of any behavior, because then you realize that, when I chase my sister and I do so after being told over and over not to do so, then that behavior is followed by another behavior, and that other behavior is very costly and it hurts. It's a punishment. So this is, another way we can think about it is a form of classical conditioning. The conditioning of behavior. So B.F. Skinner studied, of all creatures, pigeons. Maybe you've taken an intro to psychology class before and discussed operant conditioning and classical conditioning and these sorts of forms of exposure to environmental stimuli that can either lead to the repetition of behavior or the cessation of that behavior. But B.F. Skinner studied pigeons. Skinner trained his laboratory pigeons to play table tennis by reinforcing, rewarding, that is to say, rewarding specific behaviors with food. And what did he find based on these laboratory experiments with pigeons that used, of course, positive reinforcement, which used the reinforcement of reward? He found that you can modify to great specificity the behavior of pigeons through the rewarding of certain forms of behavior, just in a way that a parent does. Just in a way that parents can use rewards to incentivize their children to act particular ways, to do the things that the parents want them to do. So Skinner found that the less frequently a behavior is reinforced, the less frequently it will be exhibited. That is to say, the more frequently a behavior is reinforced, the more frequently it will be exhibited. So if you have a behavior that is consistently followed by a reward, then there's a greater likelihood than then you're going to see the persistence of that behavior, precisely because that organism knows, pigeon or human being, that behavior will be followed with a reward. And part of the genetic engineering, B.F. Skinner would say, or Sigmund Freud would say, is that we are designed. We are designed, and this is Freud's concept of the pleasure principle, we are designed from birth to seek out pleasures and to avoid pains. So the whole foundation of this, right, conditioning is that you're dealing with an organism that is already pre-programmed, this is our default setting, to pursue that which is rewarding and avoid that which is costly or that is painful. Right? Unless, strangely, people find pleasure in pain, which they do, but that's something else. But it still works because then that pain becomes defined as a pleasure, and that's why those individuals seek it out. Okay, I've got two clips for you here in the classroom computer. Just switch over. switch over. Let's see here. PC. There it is. Okay. So here we go. It may take me a second to get the volume right, but let's try it.
The two pigeons are at either end of a small ping pong table. One pigeon pecks the ball as it comes toward him and knocks it toward the other pigeon. The other pigeon pecks the ball back across the table. If it goes past one pigeon, the other pigeon can eat, and if it goes the other way, the other pigeon eats. So there is it's a real game. The pigeon is reinforced for a cross-court shot if that is what gets the ball past his opponent.
Cross-court shot. So the pigeon then, with time, learns to be cunning, learns to be competitive in order to get the ping pong ball past its competitor, because when they do that, it's followed by what? A reward, right? A positive stimulus. Just in the same way that athletes today are motivated to win games. What's it about? It's about the rewards. It's about, all those people and all those players on the Los Angeles Dodgers, they want to win because what are the rewards? I mean, there's going to be, of course, bonuses. There's big money to be made. But don't forget the intangibles. It's not just the material rewards of winning, say, a national championship, but it's also the status. Also winning status, also going down in the history books as the champions for the 2024 year, right? So what is it that drives any competition, we could say? It's the pursuit of rewards. And in athletics, it's very clear what those rewards are. There's a lot of money in professional sports. There's a lot of status and fame and celebrity and all the things that generally people regard as being the greatest rewards that life has to offer. So here these pigeons are becoming, in training, they're becoming athletes. And if they can outsmart one another, of course, they don't get titles and rings and that sort of thing and bonuses, but they do get feed, right? They get more feed. Okay. And I've got another clip for you here. If I can figure out how this thing works. All right. Okay. All right, here we go. So he's going to be able to, through positive reinforcement, through rewarding, you'll see the pigeon begin to turn. And as the pigeon turns in the direction that B.F. Skinner wants him to turn, then he'll start rewarding that behavior until finally the pigeon goes 360 all the way around. And it's simply through rewarding that behavior.
And we're going to try another pigeon now, and I will try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird. I find this bird has been already conditioned to eat when the magazine sounds and the light flashes. Now we'll just watch its behavior a bit. It's not doing anything in particular, you see, but I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn. What I do is simply, as I did then, to wait for some part of that behavior. There's more of it, you see. You see the effect is instantaneous. I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now. And then I reinforce that movement. I wait for a more pronounced movement than that. It's got to be more than that. There we go, all the way around.
Right, so just through incrementally reinforcing the movement of the pigeon, he's able to then train to condition the pigeon to go all the way around. And then after this, the pigeon knows, oh, okay, that's how I get the reward. I just continue going in circles. And that's what the pigeon ends up doing. Not that drastically different from what you and I do. We find out in life, through life experience, what are the things that are rewarding, what are the things that are costly. Okay, I want to avoid the costly things. What are the rewarding things? What are the behaviors that I can engage in repeatedly that will lead to the rewards? Right? So maybe you do this, say, when it comes to exams and preparing for exams, and you say, well, I'm gonna try out different methods of preparation. Maybe one method of preparation, one course is I'm going to really sit down, I'm going to really study, and I'm going to get rid of all distractions as possible. I'm just going to focus on my work so I can study and prepare. And then maybe there's other courses in which you say, I'm going to do nothing at all. I'm not going to prepare, I'm not going to study, I'm not going to do anything at all. And then you take the exams, and then you get the feedback. And which of those, in your performance based on your preparation or lack thereof, which of those is met with reward and which of those is met with punishment? And you may find that when you prepared for an exam, you got a higher grade as opposed to a lower grade. And for the courses in which you didn't prepare, you got a lower grade punishment as opposed to a higher grade reward. And then you say to yourself, okay, I now know what I need to do behaviorally in order to get the reward of a B or an A. And that's the basic idea behind it, is that it's through our exposure to the spectrum of benefits and costs that we then adapt our behavior. We change and modify our behavior in order to do the thing that brings out the reward. So it's really one of the oldest explanations for behavioral modification. If you want somebody to repeat a behavior, you reward it. If you want somebody to avoid repeating a behavior, you punish it. Just as parents would do with kids. Right? So what B.F. Skinner then was arguing, and what social exchange theorists are arguing, is ultimately that pigeons and humans share behavioral similarities. Both species seek out rewards and avoid punishments. Individuals are more likely to repeat a behavior if it is rewarded, and less likely to repeat a behavior if it is punished. So then what is it that what are the things that we take into account when we're making rational decisions as rational subjects? We take into account what is the likelihood that this behavior, if enacted, will lead to rewards? What's the likelihood that if this behavior is enacted, it will lead to punishments? And we can say the rational actor is the actor that is willing to engage in a form or line of behavior that leads to greater rewards than costs. Now, social exchange theorists and rational choice theorists are not saying there is a course of action without any cost. It's all relational. There's the concept, another concept that comes out of economics, which is opportunity cost. The fact that you're here, right, at UCLA for 4 years and devoting most of your time and energy to your studies means that you can't be other places doing other things. There's an opportunity cost to being here, right? But it comes down to, well, what do you think, even though there's an opportunity cost with being a college student, and of course, financial cost with being a college student, et cetera, the idea is that most of you are here today because you believe that this investment in your education will be rewarding. And in the long term, and this is true, and the facts back this up, over the lifetime of your earnings, it's without doubt, without question, you will make far more with a college degree than without one. So you've already made a rational decision by spending 4 years investing in your education, because you know that the market return, the financial return, will be greater than if you don't spend that 4 years. So yes, it's costly. It's exhausting. And reading these, and reading these chapters in a contemporary theory textbook, there is cost associated with this. But there are rewards associated with the college degree that are far greater than the costs that are associated with, say, having to read weekly chapters on contemporary sociological theory. Costs have the effect of reducing the frequency of an otherwise rewarding behavior. So it could be that if there's one behavior that for a period of time was rewarding, for some reason it becomes more costly with time, then it's most likely that that person will abandon that course of action. They will abandon the repetition of that behavior because it over time has become costly. Okay, so that was just the one principle that was taken from behavioral psychology. So that's half of the story. The other half of the story comes from neoclassical economics. Because again, Hammons is synthesizing two principles. The main principle incorporated from neoclassical economics is that people exchange valued goods. People exchange valued goods. Economists, for example, study exchange carried out under special circumstances with a most useful built-in measure of value, and that most useful built-in measure of value is its exchange value, is the price of any commodity or the price of any service. Consumers are rational actors that are making economic decisions what to buy, say, for example, as a consumer, based in part on the price of a commodity. Is it worth it, right? You find yourself looking on Amazon or going to Target or Walmart or wherever it might be, and there's some commodity that you like, and you make a rational decision. Is that commodity worth the cost, the price of that commodity? It may be that initially, a corporation or a company, they advertise a good for a certain price, and they're able to move a certain amount of inventory at that price, but find that they actually want to sell more of that, more units. So what do? What's a way to incentivize the consumption of that? They lower the cost. And again, it's always that assessment. It's cost relative to rewards. Maybe that item, as much as you want that item, at $200, the cost is still greater than the reward. But maybe if they take 33% off, then the cost is more proportional with the reward, and maybe that the reward then is greater than the cost and the person makes the purchase. However, as Hammons points out, we're not simply dealing here with valued goods, right? Economists study the production, distribution, exchange, and consumption of commodities and services, right? The tangibles. But social exchange theorists know that exchange is not strictly economic. Hammons saw exchange processes not as the exclusive domain of the economic marketplace, but as an integral part of all social life. What social exchange theorists then are providing us with is a rationale that can explain why people have the interactions they have and why people develop the relationships they develop with others. It's because those interactions are exchanges, and exchanges of things of value. and the relationship, say you develop, say you meet somebody, say you're new to UCLA and you meet some other students here, and there's one student in particular that you through your interactions, your exchanges, you come to realize are of great value. That simply having a conversation with this person, or maybe it's this person's sense of humor, or whatever it may be, that you find out that your interactions with that person lead to the exchange of things of value. Now again, the thing that's being exchanged, there's no sort of commercial financial activity that you're having with this other person. It's simply the exchange of something, say, as good company. But Hammonds would say, other social exchange theorists would say that you're drawn to other individuals, you're drawn to interact and to maintain those interactions and see that those interactions develop into a relationship precisely because you believe that you're benefiting from the exchanges with this individual. Just as if that, for some reason, something changes in the dynamic of that relationship, and suddenly you find that your exchanges and interactions with them end up being costly, then the relationship itself is defined as costly, and you're more likely to leave it. So exchange, Hammonds notes, occurs in non-economic settings. It involves material, tangible, but also non-material, intangible goods as well. So it can just be, think about your closest friend and time spent with. What's the point of the interaction? What's the point of the relationship? They're giving you something of value. That is actually, for the social exchange theorists, that is actually an exchange. You're exchanging company. Good company, though, is hard to find. And so when you find good company, of course, it's that you want to maintain your end of the deal, to also make sure that this person who's spending time with you, because there are opportunity costs with spending time with you, they could be spending time with somebody else. So you want to make sure that you're delivering rewards for them so that they continue to maintain the relationship. Right? Just as if they like the relationship, want to continue to give you rewards so that you'll stay committed to the relationship. The idea is that we're most committed to relationships that are rewarding, that are beneficial. Anybody who says, I've been in a bad relationship, then is admitting that it's bad exchanges that lead to the dissolution of the relationship. Where the person says, I don't really know what I'm getting out of this relationship anymore because it seems so terribly costly to me. I'm not happy in this relationship is another way of formulating it. What's likely to happen if behavioral modifications aren't made between those exchange partners? That relationship is likely to dissolve. And individuals will seek out new exchange partners. New exchange partners that they believe will actually give them the rewards that they want relative to costs. So everything they're telling us socially, think of every individual as an exchange partner, they would say. Just don't think of that person as a person. Think of that person as an exchange partner, whether it's your employer, or whether it's your friends, or whether it's your professors. This is also a system of exchange as well. That you give me something of value, and I give you something of value. You give me a job, and I give you sociological knowledge. And that's the exchange. Social behavior is an exchange of goods, material goods, but also non-material ones, such as symbols of approval or prestige. So some people do things and you say, well, why did you do it? What was in it for you? And they say, well, I don't know. I just wanted to help somebody and I just wanted to do something that would make me feel good. That's the reward. A lot of pro-social people, studies have found that those that are likely to repeatedly engage in pro-social behavior do so because they find engagement in pro-social behavior, helpful behavior, to be rewarding to them. Not just rewarding to others, but to them. That they're drawn, that the rewards of helping others motivate repetition of that behavior. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with self-interest. In that sense, self-interest is a good thing because it compels somebody to help somebody else because after helping somebody else, they say, I feel good about helping somebody else. Great. Great, then we're all happy. So we are all buyers and we are all sellers in social life, and we are entering into social relationships for the purpose of exchanging things of value. So after graduation, you get your first job, and maybe you're happy with it for a year, but then there aren't as many opportunities for promotion things. You go, I feel like I've given a lot to this job. I'm working really hard. I'm putting in 50, 60 hours a week. I'm on a salary. I'm not getting paid overtime, blah, blah, blah. I'm not seeing opportunities for promotional advancement, et cetera, et cetera. And you go, I think I'm going to explore my opportunities, my alternatives and other opportunities. Right? That you're going to then seek out greater economic rewards from another employer. Every single interaction, every single relationship, social exchange there is driven by the same rationale. You want a better job. What is a better job? A better job is a more rewarding job. You're simply pursuing rewards, maximizing rewards, minimizing costs. But then you think, oh, I don't know, it's a tight labor market right now. What if word gets around, I'm looking for another job and they fire me? Well, then that enters your cognition, your rational decision making as a big cost. And you go, okay, maybe I'm not gonna. Maybe I won't. Everything ends up, why do some people stay in dysfunctional relationships? You ask and oh, this relationship is so miserable, it's so miserable for me, and then you find out, you finally comes down to that person won't leave. Why are they afraid of leaving? Because they're afraid that they're going to be alone. And they're not going to find anybody else. That's a cost. That's a cost, and it's the cost that prevents them from leaving the relationship. It always comes down, I think this is, in my opinion, it's pretty airtight, personally, just through my own sort of layman analysis and also based on the research, but there's no question about it. We are rational actors that are always assessing things in terms of the rewards and the costs. Or if you get a PhD and you decide, well, should I stay in academia or leave academia? That will largely come down to the opportunities that are available to you, which will mean a various range of rewards and costs. And you might say, I just saw on LinkedIn the other day, there's a fair number of academics that are getting PhDs and are going into the private sector. And why do they like the private sector? Because it pays far better. It's just reward. They're just simply following the economic rewards. And then they say things like, I'm able to do real science and get paid really well to do real science. When in academia, I would do real science but not get paid very well. So you just have individuals then that are simply seeking to maximize their rewards. This is what it means for self-interest to be an explanatory principle. How do we explain the decisions that people are making? Based on their assessment of the rewards and costs of repeating that behavior, of the repetition of that behavior. And when things get really, really costly, that's when individuals say, I'm not doing that anymore. I used to chew my fingernails really bad when it was one of those really, now it's, according to the most recent DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, right? Now I think it's designated as an obsessive compulsive disorder. It used to just be a really, really bad habit, right? We referred to nail biting as a bad habit. Now it's considered potentially, symbolic of obsessive compulsive disorder behavior, right? That sort of thing. So anyhow, chewing my nails until one time I was chewing my nails. I was teaching at Chapman University at the time. There was a giant stack of exams that I'm grading, and I'm chewing my nails. I got so ill. I got so terribly sick, and it was very clear to me why I got very sick. It's because I'm touching all these exams that all these other students have touched, and I'm chewing my nails. I got so sick, and I was sick for about a month, and I said, that's it, never again. I'm not chewing my nails ever again, and I quit cold turkey. I did not. I was well into my 30s, and that happened, and I said, nope, it ain't worth it. Chewing my nails, so that cost, that punishment, being sick for a month, was enough to snap me out of this obsessive compulsive behavior that I had my entire life. If costs are that severe, it can lead to a significant change and modification in behavior. Right? Which is kind of the idea behind punishment, criminal punishment, that if a person breaks the law and there are penalties for that, then they're less likely, this is the concept of deterrence, they're less likely to reoffend out of fear of incurring those costs again. That's the basic idea of deterrence. It's the threat of costs, or it's the imposition of costs, that will later lead the person to change behavior, not engage in criminal behavior. That's a basic principle in criminology. Synthesizing the principles of behavioral psychology and neoclassical economics, Hammons views social interaction as exchange for the purpose of maximizing rewards. There you have it. That's it. Really provides us with a wonderful rationale, a wonderful explanation for why do people interact in the first place. And why do people see that those interactions develop into sustained relationships? Because of that interaction leads to an exchange, and it leads to an exchange of maximizing rewards. The idea is that if you're in a relationship and the relationship is not leading to the maximization of rewards, then you're going to seek out other relationships to replace it. That's it. Individuals design their conduct such that the value of the rewards gained in an exchange are greater than the cost incurred in foregoing the rewards associated with an alternative line of behavior. And as I was saying earlier, any action provides some rewards and entails some costs. So don't get this wrong, as some students have done, which they seem to think that the social exchange theorists or the rational choice theorists is saying, well, here's a course of action that entails no cost whatsoever. No, there will always be a cost to any course of action. But what we're after, and what is considered rational decision-making and rational behavior, is that most people will choose actions that tend to produce good profits. So it's keeping the costs at a, just like an entrepreneur or a CEO. There will always be production costs. There's no way in the world to produce any good or service without production costs. It's not possible. There will always be costs of production. Will always be spaces will have to be rented, utilities will have to be purchased, resources. You're going to have to compensate workers for the work that they do. There's going to be taxes. There's always going to be costs associated with economic production. But what is it that maintains the viability of any company? Is it profitable? Is that company profitable? And if the company loses sight of profitability, well, then they're filing Chapter 11 and they're going under. So it's always what are the rewards relative to the costs. People tend to choose actions that produce good profits and avoid actions that produce poor profits or generate costs. The idea is that's what you want to avoid the most, generating costs. So go ahead and gamble and go ahead and have some fun. And maybe if you say, there are those, I was in Vegas a couple of weekends ago, there are those that say, hey, gambling is my form of entertainment, right? You have your form of entertainment. You like to spend a certain amount of money on going to the movies, or you like to spend a certain amount of money of maybe going bowling or whatever it is. Some people that are pro-gambling say, I set aside a certain amount of money to gamble because that's what I enjoy. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that because all entertainment is costly, right? If you want to go watch, for example, the Rams or the Chargers or the Dodgers, it's all costly. It's costly entertainment. You're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a ticket. Because you have to make the decision, is it worth it? Or you're just going to wait at home and just watch it at home. But going back to the gambling example, gambling becomes irrational when it becomes too costly. Wait a minute, I'm losing my whole paycheck here on DraftKings. This isn't working for me. I'm not, don't worry, I don't do any gambling. Behavioral rationale then is that humans are reward seeking and they're cost avoiding. In this framework, then all interaction occurs through a relationship, a connection between two people, with people contributing benefits and potentially deriving them from the interaction. Because people are self-interested, the relative payoffs of relations shape interactions. So all interaction occurs through a relation, a connection between two or more people, people contributing benefits and potentially deriving them from the interaction. So the best relationships are balanced relationships because exchange partners are putting in the same amount that is deemed to be of relatively equal value. Again, we make these calculations when we consider the work that we do and the paychecks that we receive. I teach a sociology of work class. Compensation is one metric. It's one measure of, say, of work and the rewards associated with work. There are other rewards associated with work. Some people really like, say, having a great deal of autonomy, or like they have a great deal of flexibility in their work schedule. It's relative to the individual. But still, the basic rationale remains the same and provides us with a strong explanation for why individuals, say, stay with a job or leave a job. We can view each actual or potential relationship, whether involving a friend, coworker, roommate, or romance, as promising rewards but entailing costs. So romantic relationships, of course, are associated with costs, but people are likely to stay in a romantic relationship if they believe it promises and delivers adequate rewards. And people change over time, right? I mean, you can think in terms, some people, their stock goes up. Some people, their stock goes down. You know, I've seen this in relationships over the years, looking at friends of mine, you know, right out of high school. And one person just really, they're together in a relationship through college, the first few years of college. One person's doing really well, their prospects are bright, sort of their stock is up, while the other person is floundering. And they're struggling to figure out what they're doing in life. And they're not really investing in anything, they don't really have a direction, and their stock is going down. And the person who has the stock that's going up looks at the person with the stock going down and says, I don't think this relationship's going to work. Because I want to seek out an exchange partner that equals my value. Relationships are evaluated in terms of their relative rewards, gratifications, and costs, particularly effort. Oops. So profit then is the following. Rewards are greater than costs. And it also gives us why you can see, you know, it's a derivative of economic rationales. That just as a business owner would say, hey, you know, we're still doing okay, maybe the profits aren't as high as we want them to be, but we're still profitable because we're making more money than we're spending on production. So it's still a viable business. If the outcome of a given relationship is determined to be positive, that is to say more rewards than costs, then people are inclined to maintain the relationship. People are inclined to maintain the relationship. You say, well, what about those people that really hate their jobs? And they say, well, because, as they say, what's the best way to appreciate your job? Imagine not having one. So you go, okay, as much as I may not like this job, the thought of being unemployed is one heck of a cost. So yeah, it's all relative to what is the most costly thing economically. That would be being unemployed. So you can still explain using this rationale why people stay employed in jobs they don't want to do, because what's the alternative? The alternative is unemployment? Well, that's not a very good alternative. That's not an alternative that's going to provide greater rewards than costs. If the outcome is determined to be negative, they're unlikely to maintain the relationship. So the social exchange theorists would say you can apply this to any single relationship. And if you're unhappy in a relationship, start the tally, right? What are the costs? What are the rewards? And this is just as it is in this course. These things are weighted. They're weighted. We weight different benefits. We weight different costs. Just as the weekly response postings are weighted at 20% compared to the midterm that's weighted at 35%. There's greater weight that is given to the midterm than that's given to the weekly response postings. So we do the same sort of calculations in life. We give different weight to different attributes. It might be that you take a job and you go, the job doesn't pay that much, but it provides me with tremendous flexibility. I have great autonomy in the work that I do. And if you give that aspect of employment great weight, then it makes sense why you would stay with that job. So this framework is really cool, in my opinion, because it is able to account for the variation that exists among individuals and groups in terms of the weight that we assign to things. Process of partner selection. How is this viewed from the point of view of the social exchange theorists? Number one, they would say an individual assesses the worth of availables, those people that say are not in a relationship at the moment, in terms of their overall value as partners, as exchange partners. That's number one. Right? It starts with the pool of availabilities. The individual begins to assess the individuals in terms of their overall value as partners, get to know these different potential exchange partners, and then does what? Then makes a decision, selects a consenting partner, judged to do what? Judged to confer maximum rewards at minimal cost. Here you have it. Compared to other available exchange partners, that, well, okay, here we have 10 exchange partners. Well, in an ideal world, you get to choose to be with the person that is your favorite out of that 10. Well, maybe 3 of the top 3 don't want anything to do with you. Okay, now you're down to 7. You're still going to apply the same rationale. You're still going to say, okay, instead of 10, I have 7. Out of the 7, which one will confer maximum rewards at minimal cost? And that's how cognition proceeds, and that's how decision-making proceeds, and that's how behavior proceeds. So I looked at what are the qualities that partners look for in one another? What are the things of value? Now, again, what Hammonds would stress, and what I'm going to stress, is that these things can be weighted differently for you than they are for me, or differently from the person sitting next to you. These are all attributes that individuals say are desirable, that is, rewarding attributes in a partner. But exactly what their rank is depends on the individual. You have intelligence, you have sense of humor, you have attractiveness, you have kindness, honesty, dependability, faithfulness, generosity. These are the desirables in the partner. These are the things, if you could find that person that has all of these, and in great quality, then that's a great pick. You can't go wrong, right? You're gonna be with a person that makes you really, really happy. While desired partner characteristics are weighted or valued differently based on the subjective criteria of evaluators, each person does the same things. Hammonds the same. We're all striving to get the best deal. We all want the partner that delivers more rewards than costs, that delivers greater benefits than costs. So you'd say, well, I want the, and again, it depends on your weight, but you're going to want more of the things that you want that are rewarding as opposed to costly. And you say, why am I hanging out with this person who has no sense of humor and they're dumb and they're unattractive? Whatever it might be. You say, I'm not getting anything rewarding out of this relationship, out of this exchange. So then you say you change your behavior. You change your decision making. And you find somebody that you believe, and it's all subjective, that you believe, of course, delivers the rewards and delivers the benefits. There have been studies conducted by social exchange theorists analyzing the pairing of individuals of roughly equal value. Since people seek the best possible value in a potential mate, but are constrained by their own assets, this process is assumed to result in the pairing of individuals of roughly equal value. Roughly equal value. People find others that are roughly same. This is where we, and maybe this is old-fashioned. Maybe it's kind of old-fashioned. So, but you used to say, maybe they don't say it anymore because you're not supposed to say it anymore. But this person's out of their league, right? Somebody say, oh, well, she's dating this guy, but she's out of his league. One day she's going to learn that, and she's going to move on. Well, it's the same idea. We have a sense of what our value is as potential mates, as we're also assessing others. And the idea is that you say, or the classic thing in high school where you have the two most popular individuals in the class, the two most likable, the two most attractive, and then they're that power couple. The power couple, in Hollywood or whatever it is. Angela Jolie and Brad Pitt, way back when, was sort of the pairing of this power couple, these two people that have it all. Well, why aren't they with other people? Why are they with average people? Well, because they would be acting irrationally if they did that. Because what they're trying to do is what everybody's trying to do, which is maximize rewards, minimize costs. So of course, you want to identify that person that has just as much to offer as you have to offer, and you're a celebrity. So you seek out other celebrities. So Hammond's interest lies in explaining why people behave as they do in realizing their values, not why they value the things that they do. And he just was blue in the face from saying this over and over again. His argument is not that he can predict what you value. What he's saying is that once he knows what you value, he has a better idea as to what sort of behavior to predict. That's it. So it's up to you. So we can go back to this list of attributes, and you can say, oh, the most important thing that I think of an attribute to have in a romantic partner is their sense of humor. Okay. But then that can give us insight into the decisions that you will make based on the pool of availables. You're going to seek out the funniest person. Our problem is not why they hold certain values. Hammond just says, I'll just provide you with a questionnaire or a survey. And in this questionnaire or a survey, you'll tell me what it is that you find to be rewarding, you find to be costly. And based on that data, then we can predict what you're going to do. But given that they do hold these values, what do they do about them? So it is an important point that I feel bears repeating, that he's not predicting what people will value. It's all contingent. It's all contingent on what do people value. And now that they value this, and what do people find costly? And based on this, now what will people do? It's just a little tangential, but it's still, it just gives you a sense of how far back this research agenda goes, back to 1959. Relationships, these analysts found, progress through a series of stages. When sampling people explore the potential rewards and costs of a relationship. When bargaining, partners negotiate with one another to establish the most beneficial system of exchange. And when committed partners become dedicated to the established expectations and norms of exchange. So you're learning in that process of courtship, well, what is it that makes this person happy? And does, say, giving them what they need to be happy also make me happy? Right? Looking for a symbiotic relationship, a balance in the exchange of things of value. That's what it's about. And why they say it's always important to make sure, as any marriage counselor would say, before you get married, make sure that there is an affinity between the things that are being exchanged. But the committed partner that you find out, well, I know this makes this person happy, and that's why I'm going to do this, to make them happy. And they know what makes you happy, so they're going to do the things that make you happy. That's when you have a happy relationship and when you have a happy marriage. Because you're the ideal exchange partner that's lowering the costs of this association and increasing the rewards. And when both parties do it, it's a match made in heaven. But when one partner says, I'm done giving you what makes you happy. I'm resentful about something that happened in the past, so I'm withholding rewards. And then it's going to be a terrible imbalance in the exchange, just as you can imagine with companies. doing business with one another. And suppliers, they require the cost of the supplies is too much, and then the company that's procuring or purchasing those supplies says, okay, well then I'm going to have to find somebody else to provide those because the cost is too great. Same rationale in so many aspects of life, beyond the market to the most intimate personal relationships that we have. Social exchange and practical equilibrium. Group life can be said to be in a state of practical equilibrium when every member consistently emits the same kinds of behaviors over a period of time. Let us then ask why any one member's behavior should persist. Sorry, I got to speed this up a little bit because I know we're running out of time. How do they explain enduring patterns of behavior? How does the social exchange theorist explain enduring patterns of behavior? Enduring patterns of behavior are sustained by the perceived fairness of the distribution of rewards relative to costs incurred. So go back a couple of years to the TA strike. Had everything to do with that. The TAs were arguing that this exchange is unfair. We're not going to continue teaching until we get more benefits, until we get greater rewards out of this exchange. Right? And they were unified in saying the costs are greater than the rewards. So we're going on strike. And we're withholding labor until the UC meets our list of demands, or say meets 2/3 of it or 3/4 of it, and gives us the things that we want in terms of benefits or rewards relative to costs. So the costs, a lot of the costs of being a TA to a certain extent, some of those were mitigated too, because you can not only address the creation or maximization of rewards, but you can also, if you're the administration, lower the costs. But that's really all that was going on, is they had to come to a new agreement. An agreement that the TA said, now this is fair. Now you're providing adequate number of rewards. Now you've reduced, say, the size of discussion sections, thereby lowering the workload and lowering the costs. And we're going to agree to a new contract. Bingo. That's it. Everything in life comes down to creating that consensus, that agreement as to what is fair. What is fair in a relationship? What is fair in a family? What is fair, say, if you're an athlete with the coach and everything? It's all fairness. Fairness is to be judged relative to the benefits and the costs incurred. So a person's behavior changes less as profit tends to a maximum. So the greater the rewards that you're getting out of a relationship, the less likely you are to change that relationship. So if you say, boy, I'm really happy in this relationship that I have with my partner. I've never been happier. What that means for the social exchange theorist is you're very, very, very unlikely then to leave that relationship, because profits are at a maximum. Just as corporations, like, do whatever you've been doing to make this company profitable, keep doing it because it's working. When do companies start to change their practices and their policies? When they start losing money, when they're not seeing the returns that they want, they start incurring costs and they say we need to make a change. So it can provide us with insights in so many ways to different institutions, organizations. Okay. All right, we're out of time. I'll see you.